As many of you are no doubt aware, the DPRK is under attack once again, this time by the UN calling for an official investigation into the treatment of people in prison in the country. They've now gone even so far as to actually compare the DPRK to Nazi Germany, because locking people up for breaking the law is exactly the same thing as locking people up because of their race, right? What is it this time, you ask? Well, I've sat down and I've read the 400-page report, which is why it took me so long to get to this video. And there's literally nothing there that we haven't heard before. I mean, literally, it's just a collection of all the stuff which they couldn't prove once before, and some of it being so ridiculous that you'd have to be a fool to believe it. Well, they've just thrown all that into one report and said this is enough to warrant an investigation. Literally, there's nothing new. The only difference is, this time they've put an official stamp of the UN on it. The only difference this time is that it's being said much more loudly than usual. The study claims that the DPRK is committing human rights crimes that are beyond anything in the contemporary world. Of course, the only way you could possibly hold this belief is if you were to be completely blind to all the human rights abuses being carried out by the United States and the UK today, to say nothing of the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan, which were both based on lies, which have now killed 3 to now maybe 4 million people by this time, not to mention drone strikes, illegal invasions to other countries, U.S. interference in Syria and Libya. These alone would show you that the supposed crimes beyond contemporary history is a lie that one could only believe if they were to ignore even the most recent history of the United States. And should we really be surprised by this? After all, what recent events have just taken place in the country? That's right, the arrest and execution of Jiang Song-Fak, who essentially was a Western puppet. All of his policies were designed to turn the country over to capitalism, to turn it over to the interests of Western nations by creating extremely exploitative special economic zones that would allow any foreign country to come in and use the DPRK for cheap labor. This guy essentially was a puppet of capitalist interests overseas. This was what they were banking on, some guy from the inside to turn the DPRK over to the West. Well, that's gone now. He's gone. And it's amazing how once you get rid of that guy who was basically trying to coup the country in favor of imperialists, all of a sudden the imperialists come out with this gigantic report which condemns the country. I'm sure the timing of this is just completely coincidental, correct? Also, aren't we in a situation right now where Kim Jong-un has declared and has actually carried out an intention towards going back to a more socialist line, to go back more to the self-reliant stance that they had? Has there not been a massive reindustrialization of the country under his leadership? Has not he actually just stepped forward and said, basically, to hell with it. You are always going to lie about us. You are always going to threaten us. So to hell with you. We're just going to build nuclear weapons in order to defend ourselves anyway. Is that what this is all about? The fact that DPRK is officially, for once, not backing down on the issue of nuclear weapons. They're going to go ahead, and they're going to build them. They've also had a successful space program, which actually got into space before South Korea did. What are we seeing? Another last kind of ditch effort by the imperialists to try to cause harm to the DPRK because their last tool inside the country is now gone, and the country is resurging. There's been a massive reindustrialization. Even defectors and even foreign organizations who are opposed to the country have admitted that the living standard of people in the country has increased. Oh, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but the fact that the DPRK is sitting on an estimated $6 trillion worth of rare earth metals has appeared in the media again. But let's return to the issue of human rights. Again, we see the same old thing. Crayon drawings of what supposedly happens in labor camps, which Human Rights Watch says that the DPRK is always denied, and Amnesty International says that the DPRK is always justified. And again, it's the same old thing. It's a crayon drawing by some disgruntled person who left the country, who probably was in jail for something that they did, and comes out with this whole huge horror sob story in order to make the country look bad. I mean, we could find way more people who come out of the U.S. prison with an even worse attitude. But let's stick to this issue of human rights. Let's stick to the issue of people being locked up and supposedly being treated unfairly. Let's take a look at what's going on in Australia right now. Most of the world seems completely oblivious to what's actually happening in the country right now with illegal immigrants. The government of Australia has special detention centers, well, essentially they're concentration camps, where people who attempt to illegally immigrate to the country are detained indefinitely. That's right. If you try to illegally immigrate to Australia, you are thrown into what is a prison camp. And like an actual one, like you're actually locked up in prison where you can never get out. As opposed to, say, a country like the DPRK, where you have a sentence that you have to carry out. These camps serve absolutely no purpose whatsoever other than to just detain people. There's no rehabilitative labor like you would get in DPRK. Now, what's it like in these camps? Well, you see, the thing is, in these Australian camps, we actually do know what's happening. There are doctors who go in and come out with first-hand accounts. People whose job it is to watch these things are in there and coming out with reports, like pregnant women not being allowed to see doctors and frequently being beaten by guards. People having their artificial limbs, eyes and stuff taken from them when they get there. I mean, the government doesn't even have to provide it. They just have to let the guy have what he already has. Those are being taken away. Medical care being denied to mass amounts of people. People being forced to stand outdoors in like tremendously terrible summer heat with not enough water. People being forced to do work for seemingly almost no reason other than to punish them without being given adequate water and food. And sometimes people are being absolutely starved. There's an astronomically high level of suicide rates among the detainees. There are abuses of children going on. All of this fully documented. There is all the proof in the world that this real crime against humanity is being carried out. What were these people's crime? Of being poor, of being brown. All of them illegal immigrants. People whose only crime was being poor and tried to get to one of the imperialist countries that actually carries out and enforces the poverty that they live in. A lot of people don't realize this, but there are now standing orders that if a refugee boat on its way to Australia is found, they are under orders to shoot and sink them, killing the occupants. No, they're ordered not to rescue them. Like, they're ordered just straight kill them, sink the boat. They're not saying shoot the people on the boat. They're saying sink the boat and let the people in it die. And this is known about. The government in Australia is putting press bans on it so that they can't report it. But the media and the rest of the world is reporting it. In fact, all this is being done with dead silence. A real crime against humanity on a massive scale is being done in Australia. Where's the UN? The crimes of the imperialist countries go completely unrecognized. And this, one of the worst ever. It's not to the scale of, say, Iraq or Afghanistan. But this is pretty goddamn bad. I mean, this is essentially locking up people in prison for doing nothing other than entering a country. Really, that's it. For being brown and poor. Where's the UN on this? Why isn't this act of blatant discrimination? Essentially, these people are being killed in these camps, which they're not allowed to leave. The Western media is nowhere. They're not reporting this at all. This is a country that has suffered every intimidation imperialism has to offer. Military, physical, economic, psychological operations, everything. By putting forth this report, it basically sanitizes everything the capitalist governments in the West are doing, which, even if these claims against the DPRK were actually true, they would pale in comparison to the crimes of imperialism, even the ones being carried out right now. What this does, this report, is an attempt to whitewash all of those and hold up these liberal Western democratic countries, these imperialist countries, as being the defenders of freedom. Capitalism brings freedom. We're the defenders of freedom because look how much we can point at somebody else, whether they are or are not actually doing something. And that is the whole point of this report. The idea that these capitalist countries are the defenders of human rights, which is what they're trying to make themselves out to be, is nothing short of absolutely ridiculous. This report being held up by the UN, particularly UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon, South Korean, is nothing more than a blatant rehash of every single lie that's ever been said against the country. Meanwhile, the crimes of imperialism go unchecked. The crimes of Australia and what it does to illegal immigrants goes completely unchecked. And don't worry, I've got sources for absolutely everything that's going on in Australia right now. This is not even to mention what they're doing to their own people with austerity measures. Once again, U.S. imperialism is turning a complete blind eye to massive human rights violations that are taking place in a first world industrialized imperialist nation, and again tries to slander, isolate, and damage a country that has successfully ridded itself of U.S. imperialism since the Korean War. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.